This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there and welcome to Global Business Africa. We'll be giving you insight into Africa's business and financial markets. I'm Uche Okoronkwo, coming to you from Kenya's capital, Nairobi. Let's start with a look at the markets. Now, across markets today, investors are betting on steady global vaccine rollouts, which they hope will result in a quick economic recovery. As a result, emerging market stocks traded close to record highs today. MSCI's index of emerging market stocks was up about 11 points below a record high. In South Africa, investors are still focused on the prospect of U.S. stimulus, also the arrival of the first 1 million COVID-19 doses, as well as the positive global markets, has certainly helped to spur sentiment there. Of course, gold and resource indices both climbed over 4% and over 3% respectively, as we saw commodity prices climbing today. Financials were down over 8%. Now, also coming up on today's show, South Africa suspends vaccine rollout over poor efficacy against local strain of coronavirus. Egypt ranks amongst the best on the continent in debt sustainability. We look at how it's doing it. And the South African electric scooter service that's giving ride-hailing apps a run for their money. Well, let's start off today's show in South Africa. The country has suspended its AstraZeneca vaccine rollout. Now, trial data showed it failed to prevent mild cases of the coronavirus variant that appeared in the country. Government officials say they'll await advice from scientists before deciding on their next move with the shot. They plan to offer the vaccines developed by Johnson & Johnson and Pfizer instead. Now, the AstraZeneca shot was originally expected to be rolled out to healthcare workers soon after the country received the 1 million doses of the vaccine. Here's Angelo Coppola with more on that story.
There are implications of the AstraZeneca vaccine trial findings for South Africa and other countries where the new variant is prevalent.
The results suggest that the variant has significantly reduced the effectiveness of the virus on mild or moderate infection, and we are uncertain about the impact of the vaccine that it will have on hospitalization, severe diseases and death.
Looking ahead, experts suggest that there's every likelihood that there will be a resurgence of the pandemic in the next 3 to 4 months.
And the question that we need to ask ourselves, in the context of knowing that the COVID-19 vaccines, both AstraZeneca as well as the J&J vaccine, are safe, foremost that they are safe. And even though there are question marks in terms of the effectiveness of the AstraZeneca vaccine against severe disease, do we want to take the risk of not vaccinating high-risk groups now, knowing that we're not going to cause harm, but that they might be protected against severe disease?
Despite the setback, the South African health authorities plan to go ahead with the vaccination of frontline healthcare workers.
We will do the implementation of the vaccine program, but we will link it with an implementation study, which in other words, it means we're going to then have to align our research bodies together with the vaccine rollout network that we had already created.
All is not lost. A second vaccine trial has been underway in South Africa, the Johnson & Johnson AD26 trial, and its data is very promising.
We have data from South Africa to show that we can use this vaccine to protect against death and hospitalization, and we are looking at further data about how this vaccine impacts on mild disease. So this is a vaccine that is a silver bullet. Yes, it won't protect against the sniffles, but it will protect against death and hospitalization.
Frontline healthcare workers are going to have to wait a little while longer for their vaccines, and that's going to have implications on the Phase 2 and Phase 3 rollouts for the rest of the population. We'll have to wait and see where they get those vaccines from. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Now, many South Africans are expressing their disappointment at the news that the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine will not be as effective as experts had hoped against the local COVID-19 variant. Take a look.
The only thing
for me, it's just a disappointment because the only thing that we were looking forward to
and set us free. It was the vaccine.
We can't trust them anymore because what they tell us and what they do is not the same.
The government acted prematurely in terms of buying the vaccine before they could have tested the vaccine. And I wonder whether the monies that they have spent on the vaccine itself, the import vaccine from India, was really necessary, because now we don't know whether the government is money down the drain or not.
Well, let's find out more from Angelo Coppola. He joins us now in Johannesburg. Angelo, good to see you. Now, how big of a setback is this halt in the rollout of this AstraZeneca vaccine? Is there a major cost implication to the government going forward?
Well, Uche, it appears that there won't be any wasteful or fruitless expenditure in this instance, and there are probably no cost implications either. Authorities do plan to use the AstraZeneca vaccine in its current form, and they're going to include an implementation strategy or study. So it's understood that the 1.5 million vaccines came in at a cost of around $135 million. That's as matters stand at the moment, though. So the deposit has been paid, and the rest becomes due when the remaining 500,000 vaccines are delivered sometime during the course of February. That, of course, may change because the situation remains fluid. But there was no mention of a refund during Monday night's briefing, and no talk of not using the vaccine in its current form, Uche.
Well, Angelo, the government also says that it expects a resurgence of infections this winter, which is starting in about 3 months' time in June. At this stage, are experts in the country satisfied that enough progress has been made to avoid further deaths in the country and, of course, economic disruption from this virus?
Well, it's unclear at the moment. The concern, of course, is about winter, and all the scientists are worried about that. But the Johnson & Johnson vaccine seems to be the one that everyone's going to at the moment. It's based on the latest trial results, so that's good news there. It's unclear what the implementation study will find on the AstraZeneca vaccine, but 3 months is not a long time. Hospitals need to be refurbished. Then we're looking at field and temporary hospitals need to be opened. New staff need to be trained to fill those vacancies that are open there right now. In terms of the economic disruption, well, that's probably going to remain for at least a year, if not longer. Projected growth rates are expected to return to those 2019 levels at the end of the year, but those numbers were anemic anyway at the best of the figures that we've seen. So we expect more deaths and slower economic recovery, Uche.
Well, in light of this news from AstraZeneca, or about AstraZeneca's vaccine, is South Africa's government now looking at a new COVID-19 strategy going forward? Is it clear how they're going to roll out the vaccine going forward?
Well, look, it's a yes and a no answer here because it's more of a tactical switch. AstraZeneca is in its current form, as I said, will be used as part of the implementation study that's going to be undertaken during the first phase of the vaccinations of those healthcare workers. Authorities have also been talking to other producers to source other vaccines just to kind of hedge their bets. They are talking to Sinopharm and to Sputnik. It's not clear if they're actually talking to Cuba, who apparently have 2 vaccines on offer and ready to go. But the health minister, Zweli Mkhize, did react very quickly to the AstraZeneca test results when they received them last week. Now it's a question of finding alternatives if that study into AstraZeneca proves that the efficacy remains at those low levels for severe cases, hospitalizations and deaths. At the moment, of course, Johnson & Johnson seems to be the go-to vaccine, and that's because they've got South African data. And that's good news because it's been tested against the variant, Uche.
Well, many thanks for that update, Angelo. That, of course, is Angelo Coppola joining us there in Johannesburg. Meanwhile, Britain's junior health minister, Edward Argar, says that there is no evidence that the AstraZeneca vaccine does not prevent death or serious illness.
But you may have seen yesterday, doing a number of broadcast interviews, Professor Sarah Gilbert was talking about this. And one of the points she made is it does appear from this study, caveated with the fact that it's only one small study at the moment, has less effect, potentially has less effect on tackling mild forms of the virus or mild impacts of the virus. But there wasn't anything she could point to that she said caused her to be concerned that it wouldn't be effective against severe forms of the illness, hospitalization, and death from the virus. And actually, that's the key thing we are seeking to tackle here at this point. We need to save lives. We need to prevent people getting this illness severely. And at the same time, that will, of course, ease the numbers of people in our hospitals, therefore supporting the NHS in terms of what they're trying to do.
And on that note, let's turn our attention to some corporate headlines. Tesla has invested around $1.5 billion in Bitcoin, and it is expected to begin accepting payment for its cars and other products with it in the near future. This has led to a 12% jump in the electronic currency, setting a new record high above $44,000. The firm says the decision was part of its broad investment policy as a company and was aimed at diversifying and maximizing its returns on cash. Meanwhile, Rwanda's national carrier has temporarily suspended flights to 3 southern African nations, South Africa, Zimbabwe, and Zambia. Rwanda Air cited the new COVID-19 variants reported in the countries. Affected customers were advised to rebook and fly at a later date at no additional cost or request a refund from the airline. And Kenya Airways has increased its cargo capacity by adapting a passenger Boeing 787 Dreamliner to start carrying cargo. The move is aimed at helping the East African nation meet flower orders ahead of Valentine's Day. Now, the conversion and increased flight frequencies will add as much as 40% capacity. And finally, Google has launched a news platform called News Showcase in Australia. This is despite threatening to pull out from the country after the Australian government proposed that it should pay media companies for content. With the legislation now before a parliamentary inquiry, Friday's launch of News Showcase in Australia will see it pay 7 domestic outlets, including the Canberra Times, Illawarra Mercury, and the Saturday paper to use their content. And that is a look at our corporate headlines. Well, let's take a short break now. Still coming up on the show. South African Airways to finalize business rescue process this month. And Egypt attracts accolades for how it is managing its debt.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible and why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sutra Naidu. Hello, Nairobi.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business. Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and Global Business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Welcome back. Now, South African Airways is set to finalize a protracted business rescue process at the end of February. Stakeholders are on track to complete the selection of a private partner for the embattled state-owned airline by the end of March. However, funding is desperately needed to complete that process. Here's CGTN Sumitra Naidu with the details.
Government bailouts and loans to SAA over the last 20 years amounts to almost $400 million. Last year, the airline was promised another $640 million, but the money is being dispersed in tranches from the Treasury. SAA has received just a quarter of the allocation thus far and hasn't been able to settle salaries.
They should have been paid much earlier, in our view, as a department, because the money was there to begin the payments so that employees weren't left in the kind of position that they eventually found themselves in. And it is definitely not the intent of government to place additional hardships on anybody. But as I've pointed out repeatedly, and the DG has pointed out as well, we only have so much of leverage in this regard.
At the end of 2019, the airline was placed into business rescue. By the end of March, SAA had to stop flying because of COVID. In September 2020, the airline was completely grounded.
The reality is that the grounding in terms of the financial crisis SAA faces of its own making, in a sense, couldn't have come at a better time, simply because the rest of the world's airlines are now operating at around about 30 to 50% capacity. The 50% capacity is more related to cargo flying. Passenger capacities on the international routes are down to 30%. So there's massive capacity out there. And I think it actually suits SAA to be grounded at this stage.
The Treasury has its hands full at the moment trying to find money for COVID vaccines, amongst other things. The Department of Public Enterprises, in the meantime, is hoping to finalize a new private equity partner for the airline.
There was a transaction advisor that was appointed, as you are aware, last year to process all of these offers that we've actually had. We do have a short list that they have actually produced. The board will be provided with that short list, and we are due to meet in the next 24 or 48 hours to conclude how we process those particular issues as well.
For now, the Special Appropriation Bill, which regulates government spending, has been passed and will open the door for the rest of the funding from Treasury to be paid to SAA's business rescue practitioners so that the restructure can be completed. Many are now waiting anxiously to hear about the new equity partner and whether SAA will fly again. Sumitra Nadu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Well, let's head to Egypt now. The country is ranked as one of the best nations in Africa in terms of managing its debt. That is according to analysis by Morgan Stanley. Now, the North African state, along with Nigeria, Cote d'Ivoire and Senegal, are seen within sustainable debt levels. They have no problems accessing the debt markets and existing funding streams with the IMF. CGTN's Yasser Hakim takes a look at how Egypt manages to keep its debt levels low.
Egypt has been going through a major rebuilding program in the last decade, following the political and economic turmoil caused by the 2011 uprising. Billions of dollars have been poured on mega infrastructure projects, constructing new cities, improving social services and transportation. It has led to mushrooming debt levels to finance this process, but still manageable according to Morgan Stanley, which ranks the North African country amongst the most successful in managing their finances.
The amounts increased, but if we talk in percentages and not amounts, the total debt to GDP has dropped from 108% to 87.5% in 4 years, which is a big success. Egypt adopted a strategy of replacing short-term loans with the long-term ones to relieve the pressure of foreign reserves, to facilitate loan repayments and avoid any delays to the economic reform plans. It used the long-term loans from treasuries and bonds in the last 3 years to fund projects, especially in the energy and renewable energy sectors, which have created huge investments and revenues to enable to steadily repay the debts.
2020-2021 should have been a breakthrough year with unprecedented hard currency revenue and fast-paced economic growth. However, the outbreak of the coronavirus pandemic and its subsequent economic fallout led to even more borrowing to sustain the economy through this ordeal.
Initially, we had to guarantee a steady flow of foreign currency income. This is a confidence-building measure that encouraged institutions like the IMF and the World Bank to open a credit line with us, knowing our economy can withstand any instabilities.
With projections of strong economic numbers and positive outlook, experts believe Egypt's borrowing trend will begin to drop significantly in the foreseeable future. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Meanwhile, the World Bank is warning that 23% of small businesses in Zimbabwe could be ruined by the lockdowns and the curfews imposed due to COVID-19. Well, CGTN's Farai Mwakutuya spoke to a businesswoman who's unsure if she will reopen when the latest lockdown is lifted.
It's named easy, but things have been anything but in recent months. COVID-19 restrictions have left the once bustling watering hole teetering because despite being closed, it's still saddled with expenses like rent and wages.
I've been forking out quite a lot of money from my own pocket now. I can't keep doing that, all right? Yes, I'd love for us to reopen, to restock, trade as normal, but if there's no money, what do we do? So unfortunately, that means a lot of my staff are going to be out of jobs, definitely.
A second wave of COVID-19 has spread exponentially, forcing a hard lockdown under which only essential services are permitted.
There is a concern when we consider the fact that most of our economy is primarily small to medium or micro, small and medium-sized enterprises who survive on day-to-day takings, as it were. This now presents a dilemma in terms of if you are reducing government services and you are also on a continuing lockdown, there are some serious ramifications in terms of the social welfare aspect of things.
Small businesses are desperate for a reprieve.
Well, it certainly feels like we don't matter. Because right now, all policies are in favor of the large businesses. Any regulation that's being implemented will suit the big organizations, not SMEs. As SMEs, we are struggling. We need to allow people to trade within certain limits under the lockdown so that we can generate money and not starve. People are starving outside, I'll be honest with you.
The hardships are forcing some to defy the rules. I'm on a street in downtown Harare that is home to hundreds of small vehicle spare shops. Now, their shop fronts are all locked up like this, but that doesn't mean that there's nothing going on here. Ostensibly milling around idly, traders are still engaging motorists to make a sale. The survival strategy is working for them, but others aren't coping as well.
So it's just a mess right now. It's a nightmare, I'll be very honest. I don't even know if we'll be able to reopen. That's the truth.
Which makes for an uneasy road ahead. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
And moving to the DRC now, where new testing requirements have added to the hurdles of a vulnerable population of couriers at the border with Rwanda. Now, the once vibrant route provided steady income for the couriers, but now has only a few dozen applying the route between the twin cities of Rubavu and Goma. New regulations have left dozens stranded and desperate. Here's CGTN's Beryl Oro with the story.
Over the short stretch of no man's land between Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo, couriers living with disability are forced to sit idle and their wares stationary, laden on supersized tricycle due to the legal limitations linked to the pandemic.
It is difficult for me as a person living with disability to go looking for work elsewhere if I cannot find work here at the border. I cannot find work anywhere because I am physically challenged. Being couriers is vital for us because as long as we work as couriers, we will never go hungry and we will be able to feed our families.
Claude has a permit to shuttle some goods in and out of DRC tax-free, but an 8-month-long border closure last year, coupled with new testing regulations caused by the coronavirus pandemic, meant he and 200 fellow couriers saw business dry up.
We don't have $50 to get tested, and we don't even have the means to earn that much money. That's why we are sitting here doing nothing. We don't know what to do anymore. We don't know what will happen to us. We know that the borders have reopened, but we have no one to help us or guide us through this problem.
There are few opportunities for people living with special needs, especially in trade. But thanks to a decade-long old quirk in customs law, sending goods via custom-made carts is cheaper than hiring a truck.
I chose to use the services of couriers because they're more affordable than using truck drivers who bring goods from across the border.
Most have been able to benefit from the custom law. However, authorities now require the couriers to take a regular COVID-19 test, which at $40 per swab is a prohibitive cost for many who earn less than $20 a day. Rwanda gives free tests to Claude and around 60 of his colleagues, but the remaining 140 couriers must pay their own way.
What I want for our government is to help facilitate us from some of these issues. Rwanda helped us by providing us with free tests, and so should the Congolese government, so that we can go back to work and be able to feed our families.
The rest of the out-of-work couriers have been gathering on their hybrid bikes on the Congolese side of the border, hoping for a clear break in a season that globally can be considered unpredictable. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
Now, Nigeria's state oil company is renegotiating commercial terms with companies that are developing its oil and gas. This is aimed at keeping the country's oil sector competitive amid a price collapse. The Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation's managing director says the company will seek $2 billion in pre-finance to overhaul its Warri and Kaduna refineries. Now, Africa's largest oil exporter is grappling with how to raise its revenue while also attracting investment to its crucial oil sector. Oil companies, including Shell, ExxonMobil, Total, and Eni, are now cutting billions in spending after bruising profit slumps last year. Some are now pivoting money and manpower to develop renewable fuels or to focus on the most cost-effective markets.
Our environment has changed. There's some level of transparency and accountability that wasn't there before. The competition that we have will clearly not offer the kind of benefits that we can deliver in this country. And obviously, we'll keep our partners. But we are very conscious of the fact that people have choices. Companies do make choices to leave countries when they have to.
Meanwhile, fatalities in South Africa's mines rose 18% in 2020, and that was driven by accidents related to falling rocks and transportation. That is according to provisional figures from the Minerals Council of South Africa. The industry had recorded 58 fatalities by December 14th, and that's compared to 49 deaths during the same period the previous year. Here's CGTN's Angelo Coppola with more on that story.
One of the main causes of these mine fatalities was so-called fall of ground incidents.
While the issue of seismicity, which has been troubling us for a number of years, we seem to have contained that. We've done well to our critical control management processes, but we've seen last year fall of ground has given us a challenge.
The mining industry is very concerned about the increase in fatalities.
We are busy with an analysis trying to understand whether even the COVID-19 itself, the pandemic itself, whether it has had any impact on this regression. It's still early to say about that, particularly when it comes to the issues of state of mindfulness while the miners are at the workplace.
Transport-related accidents remain one of the major contributors to mine deaths. The sector is trying to find solutions.
There's a big project being driven by the Minerals Council and its members focusing on collision avoidance systems, where we are installing technologies that will retard the speed of these mobile equipment or mobile machinery, or what we call trackless mobile machineries in our mining workplaces.
When there's a fatality on a mine, the law stipulates that the shaft or entire mine where the accident occurred must be closed.
We always believe that, if you cannot mine it safely, why should we mine? We cannot mine if it's not so. The lives of our employees are sacrosanct, and we cannot really worry about production while we need to get things fixed to make sure that we embark on safe production.
Mine fatalities have been a part of the South African mining environment for many years now, and it's unlikely to change anytime soon. And that has to do with the depth of those mines and the complex geology. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
You're watching Global Business Africa. We're going to take a short break now, but still to come. Semiconductor shortages across the world hits car production. And how group buying has helped some Chinese communities cope with the coronavirus pandemic.
No war, no one again, he can hold in guns. Machine guns from police forces toward the protesters.
Were you worried about your life at that particular time? Not at all.
The Excellency, thank you very much for your time. What is your assessment of the state of the continent today?
Africa has the potential to power itself.
Excuse me.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are these stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
And now to other news making headlines today. A new wave of desert locusts in Somalia has forced authorities in the East African nation to declare a state of emergency. The declaration comes despite months of effort by the federal government and the United Nations to contain the locust invasion. And still in Somalia, opposition leaders say they no longer recognize President Mohamed Abdullahi Farmajo as leader of the country. His term ended today with still no agreement on holding parliamentary and indirect presidential elections. The opposition alliance said they will reject any attempt to extend the president's term. And in Sudan, Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok has dissolved his government ahead of the expected appointment of a new cabinet on Monday. Now, Sudan is scheduled to form a new unity government comprising all parties to the peace agreement signed in 2020. The new government is expected to be composed of several political parties. And finally, in the Democratic Republic of Congo, a new case of the Ebola virus has been detected in the east near the city of Butembo. The victim tested positive for Ebola on February 1st and died in hospital 2 days later. Now, the announcement by the Ministry of Health potentially marks the start of DRC's 12th Ebola outbreak. And that's a recap of today's top headlines. Now, an increasing number of automakers are expanding production cuts around the world as they struggle to cope with a worsening shortage of semiconductors. Take a look.
Renault and Stellantis are the latest automakers to suspend production at several factories
as they join other of automakers grappling with the worldwide shortage of crucial semiconductors. Car makers around the world, including Volkswagen, use such chips in engine management.
Chip shortage has impacted our production since last year. Our car sales decreased by about 10,000 units in last December. The shortage has resulted in the failure of electronic stability program production. Unfortunately, this impact will continue to be the first quarter of this year.
The automotive semiconductor shortage was caused in part by soaring demand from consumer products, such as laptops, during the pandemic. Some believe chip makers favor consumer electronic customers because their orders are larger. A smartphone maker can produce over 1 billion devices, compared with 100 million cars. Analysts believe the crisis reflects the importance of chips in the auto sector.
Well, you can't make any car if you're missing one part. Chips have become a huge part of the vehicle. We've gone to electronic everything on the car. So you need chips for your braking systems, transmissions, engine management, your airbags, all the safety systems. And of course, then we want all the creature comforts like infotainment systems that require chips. And now we're going to electric vehicles, and those will require chips. So no, you can't build a car without a computer chip.
Initial reports suggest the shortage for the auto industry might disrupt production till 2023, which means a slower recovery in new vehicle sales and slumping profitability. Some Chinese auto chip makers are also looking to develop their own high-quality, refined, and advanced chip-making technology.
We have some innovative forces in computing chips, AI chips, and control chips. In recent years, we have made remarkable results in technological innovation and industrialization development, which laid a good foundation for us to accomplish independent control of vehicle-mounted chips.
There might be another silver lining. Some major chip makers do say that going forward, they will prioritize supplies for automakers.
And in Britain, automaker Rolls-Royce is proposing to temporarily close its jet engine factories for 2 weeks as it manages costs due to the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. The move is expected to affect all 19,000 staff in the company's international civil aerospace division. The aero engine maker has begun talks with unions on the shutdown and cost-cutting at its civil aerospace unit. Now, Rolls-Royce finances have been hit by the pandemic after its airline customers grounded their planes. The company warned last month that travel will be even more constrained than expected this year, leading to increased cash outflows. And moving on, community-based group buying has been helping Chinese through the pandemic. So how exactly does that work? Here's CGTN's Yu Yang with the story.
Liu Xiujuan is the leader of a buying group at the Binghedongli community in Beijing's Daxing district. Along with the group members, she uses a WeChat group to gather orders and negotiate lower prices when buying fruits, vegetables, and other daily necessities.
Our
community buying group has about 600 members. They are all residents here. Some are young, some are old. For older people who can't use phone all that well, we help them with their orders.
Liu works with Chengxin Youxuan, a fresh produce and grocery community e-commerce platform, and the Chinese ride-hailing giant Didi Chuxing. After receiving the group's orders from Liu, the platform ships the goods in bulk to her, resulting in lower logistics costs and increased platform efficiency.
During the pandemic, people feel it isn't safe to go out and shop. Our services have brought a much-needed convenience.
Liu has a store here in the community. Every time she receives goods from the e-commerce platforms, she will place them here, and the customer will come to pick up what they have purchased.
I usually place an order in the evening, and the goods arrive the next morning. I pick them up every time I get off work. It's very convenient.
The group buying platform is very good. The vegetables and fruits are very fresh. We don't need to worry about going to markets with the pandemic going on.
Didi started its community-based group buying business in June 2020. The service is currently offered in the cities of Beijing, Chengdu, Wuhan, and Guangzhou.
We have a strict process of selecting products because most of what we offer is vegetables and fruit. We must make sure they're fresh when they're delivered.
The company says it started the business because of small stores losing business amid the pandemic. By combining Didi's e-commerce platform with the geographical advantages of the stores, it benefits both stores and residents.
We will further expand our group buying business in the future. For example, in Beijing, most of our current groups are in the city's south. We'd gradually like to expand northward.
Didi isn't the only company to cash in on community group buying. Internet titans Alibaba, JD.com and Meituan have poured big money into this budding sector. But some experts say it may only further hurt small vegetable vendors, adding that long-term consumer interest may also be compromised if the vegetable market becomes monopolized. Yu Yang, CGTN, Beijing.
Meanwhile, flower growers in China are amongst the many hit hard by the pandemic, but they're hoping the Spring Festival rush will help them recover. Many are now turning to live streaming services to boost their sales. Here's CGTN's Market reporting from southwest China.
White willows, orchids and winter sweets, decorated with festive cars and ornaments. It's a ritual for many families roaming around Kunming's famous flower market at this time of the year.
We've lived here all our lives. We can't travel far, and this place is so lively and so pretty.
We buy flowers every year. These are my wife's favorites.
This year, we are answering the call not to go out too much during the Spring Festival, but it's still important to decorate the house.
The Dounan Flower Market has long been regarded as the weather vane of China's flower industry. For every 10 flowers sold nationwide, 7 are from this place. But, like many industries, it's been badly affected by the pandemic.
Not so good. I used to earn 1,000 yuan per day during the holiday. Now I only earn half.
Deliveries to high-risk areas are either expensive or prohibited, and there aren't as many tourists as before.
However, some industry players have been looking at other options.
New Year flowers take up 15 to 20% of a flower grower's annual income. Last year, the pandemic cost them at least 2 billion yuan. This year, while trying different sales modes, like online platforms, which get most orders at night, so we've extended opening hours till midnight.
Because many flower growers aren't familiar with e-commerce practices, they turn to special sellers known as online flower agents, who can market their products all over the country.
This is what it looks like at 8 o'clock in China's largest flower market. While the daytime market mainly targets individual customers, the night market is where the real business gets done.
These flower agents use live streaming services and sell at much lower prices than at typical flower shops. A good flower agent can take over 100 orders a night. It's hugely significant for many of the flower growers here, whose livelihoods for the next lunar year depend greatly on the holiday sales. Maka, CGTN, Kunming.
And on that note, let's take a look at commodity markets today. Oil prices climbing over 1%, with both Brent crude and WTI at their highest level since January 2020. Brent nudged past $60 a barrel, lifted by supply cuts amongst key producers and, of course, hopes for further U.S. economic stimulus measures that can help boost demand. Meanwhile, precious metals were also up today across the board. Traders say platinum is generating more interest because of its role in the green economy and its relative scarcity. It is up 15% in the past 12 months. Meanwhile, gold prices muted today as treasury yields moved higher and the dollar bounced up. Though, of course, concerns over a recovery in the U.S. economy did limit gold's losses today. Let's take a short break now. Still to come on the show. We look at the South African electric scooter service that's giving ride-hailing apps a run for their money.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography. and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Aden, Tunis, Cairo, Juba, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival, and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Now, in Tunisia, the Health Ministry has announced a new measures for people arriving from abroad in order to help prevent the spread of the coronavirus in the country. All persons entering the country's borders are required to present a negative COVID-19 test result within 72 hours before takeoff and take a compulsory quarantine for 7 days in one of the designated hotels. Now, players in the tourism sector are opposed to the move, and they've warned that it could derail key plans for the sector's rebound. Here's CGTN's Adnet Shaushi with the details.
An increase in the number of COVID-19 patients has put a strain on Tunisia's fragile health system, forcing authorities to impose new measures to curb infections in the tourism-dependent North African state. Tunisia's tourism minister explained that a second PCR negative test will be requested on the 7th day of the quarantine before visitors are allowed to leave the hotel.
The government imposed new measures for arrival from abroad as a precautionary measure in response to the appearance of the new COVID-19 variants in Europe. Just like all countries, Tunisia wants to control the flow of visitors to better manage the health situation. The 7-day compulsory quarantine at hotels is necessary as well as tests. The situation is critical in the whole world.
In a delicate balance to contain the pandemic but also keep the tourism industry afloat, the COVID-19 task force also decided to maintain the ban on flights to and from the countries where the new strains of COVID-19 become highly prevalent.
The state insists on new measures because we must remain vigilant to prevent a worsening of the situation. Tunisians, as well as foreign tourists, must comply with the prevention measures, respect social distancing, and wear a mask in public. We need to protect the population. That's why the ban on some flights is maintained.
The Minister of Health added that newcomers to Tunisia who can be exempted from the mandatory quarantine must present to the quarantine committee valid family or professional reasons, as well as a negative RT-PCR test conducted 72 hours prior to boarding.
After checking the documents, the committee may or may not validate the exemption of the traveler from mandatory quarantine. The epidemiological situation is very dangerous. It's characterized by the rapid spread of infections. We've recorded the highest monthly COVID-19 related registered deaths since the pandemic began. The hospitals are under pressure.
Tunisian health authorities say that specific cases include patients in need of a permanent or urgent help, persons with mental or physical disabilities, one single attendant accompanying each traveler, travelers coming to Tunisia to visit relatives in serious health state, or those urgently summoned by the judiciary, or in urgent missions, notably as part of combating COVID-19. According to the COVID-19 task force, some specific cases of travelers exempted from the mandatory quarantine also include diplomats, athletes taking part in international competitions, and accompanied children under 18, as well as families traveling to attend funeral ceremonies of family members. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Now, South Africa has recorded a record-setting citrus season after exports spiked as a result of high global demand. Citrus demand increased globally due to the pandemic, and country's citrus fruit industry was well positioned to take advantage of that. Here's CGTN's Travis Andrews with more.
It's been a bumper season for South Africa's citrus industry, where it's sold a record number of fruit and increased market share. That's according to the Citrus Growers Association, who say the harvest was so good that the amount of cartons sold could reach to the moon and back if placed on top of one another.
The total amount of cartons, and these are 15-kilogram boxes of fruit, of citrus fruit, was 146 million, and that equates to 2.2 million tons. And as such, South Africa is the second biggest exporter of citrus fruit in the world after Spain.
Like the rest of the country's agricultural industry, the citrus sector has been an outlier in the economy, showing steady growth in recent years. South African citrus is particularly known for its sweet taste, but the season's fruit was also in high demand largely due to global events.
Definitely the COVID pandemic did play a role. So there is a big search for vitamin C. And also, it is seen that citrus is generally a remedy for colds and flu and an immune booster.
While exports grew in key markets such as Europe, Asia and the US, economies of scale have made one country particularly attractive. As the world's largest source market, the demand for South African citrus in China has grown tremendously.
They take about 180,000 tons of citrus annually, and that's massive. We only got access in 2004. And in 2011, we were only sending 10,000 tons. So, in the last 10 years, we've increased that by 170,000 tons. So the Chinese market is really important. They take a lot of oranges.
For now, the industry plans to increase its exports by another 300,000 tons over the next 3 years, so we can assist with the country's efforts to be the #1 citrus producer in the world. Travis Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
And in South Africa, an electric transport service looks set to rival Uber in the country. According to industry insiders, Scooter RSA is touted to put a spin on the South African e-hailing transport market. It is the innovation of a young South African entrepreneur, Fazelle Dlamini. Here's CGTN's Yolisa Jamela with the story.
This is Soweto-born Scooter RSA founder Fazelle Dlamini. Dlamini launched his online-based taxi service after ride-hailing services Uber and Taxify rejected his job application a number of times. So he used that rejection to start his own company. Dubbed the Green Scooter, the entrepreneur's e-hailing service functions via an app. It works the same way as Uber and Taxify, except that the mode of transport is an electric scooter with a roof.
So Green Scooter is an automotive company manufacturing electric vehicles. We started off with importing, and then we later went on to assembling the vehicles locally. And so far, it's bootstrapped, a self-funded business. And we've been pretty much trying to prove sustainability of electric vehicles within a township environment or any environment whatsoever.
The service offers ride-sharing, food delivery and logistics services through its app. One of its distinguishing elements is its operations in a number of townships.
I would say the unique element is it's connecting the disconnected. I mean, one of the most important things is that, as much as you leave the township and you go and stay in the suburbs, you leave a part of you behind. And food is the one thing that we really, really love the most, that connects us to our roots, to our heritage.
Green Scooters also operate in more affluent areas. The green scooter vehicles are eco-friendly and they emit zero carbon emissions, therefore causing less harm to the environment.
So the ZB is 100% electric. It has a 4 kilowatt battery, top speed of 60 kilometers an hour. Average driving speed is about 42.5 kilometers an hour. Battery range is 90 kilometers from a single charge. So you use a normal 2-phase, 3-phase plug point to charge the vehicle.
Dlamini's ultimate goal is to expand the service to include a scooter assembly plant here in South Africa, with the aim to contribute in a substantial way to the creation of jobs.
So the future plan for Green Scooter is for us to eventually launch our factory. Our factory plans is that we plan on manufacturing 3,000 vehicles within our first year. Our conservative approach would be to manufacture about 500 vehicles within our first year and sell those. With that, it's creating a lot of sustainable employment opportunities.
The social entrepreneur is also keen to expand to the rest of the African continent. Yuli Jamila for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Now, the capital of Colombia has acquired almost 1,000 new electric buses for its public transportation system. The purchase makes Bogota one of the cities outside of China with the largest fleet of completely electric buses. Michelle Bege has more on that story from Bogota.
Environment-friendly and state-of-the-art technology is coming to Bogota. The city's public transportation system has announced it has acquired nearly 1,000 new electric buses. By next year, the city's fleet will total nearly 1,500.
We, Bogota, are entering a period of being at the vanguard, not only in Latin America, but in the world. Santiago de Chile has also had important advances, and we have both been working on helping the environment in our cities and in the operation of the electric buses.
Chinese automobile manufacturer BYD won several bids to provide Bogota with its electric buses. The first contract was for 470 buses, which were delivered last year. BYD reports that the new order of 1,000 purely electric buses is the largest that any company has gotten outside of China.
Once these buses are up and running, the reduction of CO2 emissions will be 87,000 tons a year. This number is important and will affect the quality of air in Bogota and the quality of life of inhabitants.
Bogota's public transportation officials say there are challenges in acquiring new technologies. One of them is the need to build the infrastructure and personnel necessary to facilitate the operation and management of the vehicles. It's a challenge the city has committed to take on in the last couple of years. While the first batch of electric buses came fully assembled from China, this new order will have the participation of Colombia's automotive industry.
With the new bids for contracts, we wanted to support the national industry more, so part of the requirement was for the company's proposals to include assemblies of the buses in Colombia.
The new bus fleet will begin to circulate this year, and officials expect to have it fully operational in the first half of 2022. Michelle Bege, CGTN, Bogota, Colombia.
And before we leave you today, a quick look at Africa's currencies. South Africa's rand falling 0.5% on the day as its vaccination program hit a snag after the government put on hold the use of those AstraZeneca vaccines. Meanwhile, Nigeria's naira appreciating at the NAFEX window. It closed at 396.17 naira per dollar. Now, traders say Brent crude approaching the $60 mark was a psychological boost for Nigeria's currency handlers today. And that's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on your screen. You can also follow us on our various digital media platforms. From me, Uche Okoronkwo, and the rest of the team, thanks for